Redrawing their congressional maps in a way that didn't discriminate against black Alabamans was the only task of Alabama lawmakers. They failed yet again, CNN reports.
Federal court has struck down a newly drawn congressional map in Alabama for the second time after state lawmakers ignored a ruling from the Supreme Court and refused to create a second black majority district in the state. White voters make up the majority of 6 out of the 7 congressional districts in Alabama, where more than a quarter of the state's population is black. The 3-judge panel, 2 of them, who I should note were appointed by former President Trump, wrote in their unanimous decision today that they were, quote, disturbed by the Republican-controlled state legislature's actions. The newly drawn map created 1 majority black district and boosted the share of black voters in a second district from roughly 30 to 40%, but reduced it in another one. Alabama's Attorney General says he is going to appeal, and the case could end up full circle at the Supreme Court.
The story begins when Alabama's Republican-controlled legislature, desperate to take control of the U.S. House of Representatives, consolidated most of the state's black voters into a single legislative district. The GOP legislators meticulously drew district boundaries to distribute the remaining black voters in small quantities across all other districts of the state. The outcome was 7 districts that were strangely and irregularly shaped, dividing black neighborhoods and communities with shared histories, cultures, and economic interests. By dividing black communities so thoroughly, Republican legislators ensured that black voters would have little ability to elect officials who come from black communities or speak to issues that are important to them.
Joining me now is Alabama Congressman Terry Sewell. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. Court-appointed experts, I should note, are now going to be the one who are drawing these 3 proposed maps. That's what they'll then decide on. It's not the state legislature like before. Do you have confidence, though, that they will be able to draw a fair map that accurately represents the state of Alabama?
I do. You know, I have to say I was more than just disappointed that the state legislature didn't even try to adhere to the Supreme Court's ruling. The Supreme Court was pretty clear. They said draw 2 majority-minority district or something quite close to it. And as you said, it was 1 district, my district, they took from 55% to 50%. And then they created another district that was around 39.9%. And definitely that's not quite close to it. But you know what, Caitlin, today was a victory for Black Alabamians, but also for all Alabamians, because what we're fighting for is fairness, right? We want to make sure that irrespective of your race or your zip code, that every voter has an equal opportunity for their voice to be heard in this democracy. There's nothing more fundamental than that.
The GOP also eliminated any incentive Alabama's elected officials might have to listen to, let alone care about, black people living within their district. The maps are so clearly racist that a panel of 3 federal judges, 2 of whom were appointed by former President Donald Trump, found the maps unconstitutional and in violation of the Voting Rights Act. Instead of accepting their loss, GOP lawmakers appealed, and a 5-member majority of the U.S. Supreme Court, including 2 conservative justices, upheld the lower court's ruling and ordered Alabama to go back to the drawing board. On August 14, the same 3-judge panel that reviewed the original maps reviewed Alabama's revised maps, and Tuesday, they unanimously struck down the new maps as well, saying that they were deeply troubled by the legislature's refusal to provide the remedy we said federal law requires.
And the state is now responding with the Attorney General. They're basically trying to escalate the issue up to the Supreme Court. They hope that there is a stay on this decision today. How do you expect, or how do you hope the justices will respond to that? Because, I mean, obviously, someone like Justice Kavanaugh is going to be a key person to this decision that is going to be made.
Well, you know, the Supreme Court decision was pretty tight, 5-4, and Kavanaugh was pretty clear in his position as well. I really hope that they will reject the stay immediately so we can continue with the process. I know that it's going to go on concurrently with the drawing of the maps. The special master has until September 25th to come up with 3 different maps. And, you know, Caitlin, the problem is it was possible to draw 2 majority-minority districts. In fact, the Supreme Court had in its evidence by the plaintiff's attorneys 11 maps that showed that there was a way that you could have 2 majority-minority districts. And so the blatant disregard for the Supreme Court's edict, as well as this 3-judge panel, was just, you know, really unacceptable. And when I think about it, it's also an insult to those of us who know that they could do better. They could have done better.
Despite two different federal courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, ordering the Alabama legislature to comply with the almost 60-year-old Voting Rights Act, the GOP is so determined to strip black voters of their rights that they created a new map that simply tries to cheat in new ways, something the federal judges saw through. The law requires the creation of an additional district that affords black Alabamians, like everyone else, a fair and reasonable opportunity to elect candidates of their choice, the judges wrote. In what is perhaps the most clear and unambiguous statement of the court in years, the judges said the new map plainly fails to do so.
We're both from Alabama. We both love Alabama. But this is not just a story about Alabama. It's a national story, really, because we see similar legal battles playing out in other states, half a dozen of them, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. Do you see this as a Republican strategy to hang on to their razor-thin majority in the House? Or, how high do you see the stakes here?
Well, it was Frederick Douglass who said that power can see nothing without a struggle. And so this is a real fight going on now, because if we can get more congressional seats by fairer maps, that will affect the change in balance in the House, and the House of Representatives. And that's pretty important. But for me, when I look at just the bare bone of what this is about, we know that our state has a long storied history in racism and segregation and voter disenfranchisement. But we also come from a state of wonderful people, black and white, who gathered around and tried to do the right thing. They marched in order to desegregate. They also, marched irrespective of what happened on that bridge. John Lewis and those marchers marched and defied and really helped democracy get to where it is. They say that justice, that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, but it doesn't get there by itself. It gets there by courageous people like those plaintiffs that filed this lawsuit. And I think incrementally we'll get there, because this is really about political power. African Americans make up 27% of the voting age population in Alabama, and yet we only have one of the 7 seats. That's 14% representation. That is not what we need.
But what do you make of the fact, given that storied and ugly history of courts having to intervene for voting rights in places like Alabama, that it's 2023 and this is still a fight that you're having?
Yeah, but as John Lewis said, you can never give up and never give in. We know that the pendulum swings right to left, that progress is elusive, and that every generation has to fight to hold on to the progress that we've made and to try to extend it. And so I see this as a further step towards progress in our state. If Alabama can have 2 districts where African American voters in Alabama have the opportunity to choose a candidate of their choosing, that to me is progress. And I know that it will affect not only Alabama, but we're waiting on Louisiana and Georgia, and it will have a ripple effect, and not just in congressional seats, because what this case says is that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is alive, well, and enforceable, Section 2. And so Section 2 is about voter dilution. So even in Jefferson County, where we have 5 commission seats, I think that you'll see a lawsuit to try to see whether or not that violates the VRA Section 2, because there's so many African American voters in that county. It has a big effect all around. And I know that John had some incomplete business before he left this great earth, but he left us a wonderful roadmap, he and those foot soldiers. And what they said is that we have to be bold enough, encouraged enough to do the right thing no matter what, and to get into some good trouble. And frankly, Caitlin, we're in some good trouble right now. And I'm really hoping that the Supreme Court will quickly overturn this motion for a stay, and so that we can get on with the business of creating 2 majority minority districts in our home state of Alabama.
GOP leaders, lawmakers, and strategists are demonstrating their identity and their organization's beliefs, and it is not about democracy or free and fair elections. Instead, they are demonstrating a disdain for the law and a willingness to openly engage in racism in order to obtain a single seat in the U.S. House. It's unacceptable, and no American who values freedom or equality under the law should support it, even if the resolving of Alabama's congressional maps is successful in the immediate challenge. The fact remains that the Republican-controlled legislature, it is not possible to trust the GOP as an organization to act in accordance with constitutional law or uphold the rights of American citizens to free and fair elections. The personal beliefs of Alabama's Republican legislative majority cannot be speculated about. Despite not believing themselves to be racist, they still engage in blatantly racist behavior. Legislative maps are drawn intentionally to restrict Black Americans' voting power. Giving greater voting power to white Americans is racist. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Happened just now. Enjoy hearing your thoughts. Please leave comments. Thanks. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Happen Just Now for more content about accountability of all public officials and policy and procedures.